This last year has been nothing but straight W's for Eastern games and games developers. Korea especially has been on a tear lately, with games like Lies of P, The First Descendant, and Stellar Blade, which is still my personal favorite game of the year. Phantom Blade Zero also looks excellent, and that's coming out of the Beijing studio. And now we have the overnight success story, Black Myth Wukong, leading the single-player charge in 2024. Monkey see, monkey do, this game is raking in the revenue. Wukong has been shattering records since it released a little over 2 weeks ago, and just yesterday we got the news that an expansion DLC has been announced and is already in development. In today's video, we're looking at why this game has been such a big hit, because it kind of came out of nowhere. Welcome to the channel, I'm Star, this is my first video on Wukong, so I hope you like it. Just by existing, this game has taken a crowbar to the kneecaps of the AAA gaming industry. It's shining a huge spotlight on all the worst parts of modern gaming, and I'm here for every second of it. On its release day, it achieved the second highest peak player count in the history of Steam charts, overtaking Palworld and becoming the all-time highest single-player game. 2.4 million concurrent players just on Steam, probably even more on console. In its first 2 weeks, the game has reportedly sold over 18 million copies, and it's well on track to make $1 billion, which is crazy for a game like this. GTA 5 and Modern Warfare 2 are the only other games that have sold faster, and Game Science was able to do this on just a $75 million budget. This game is proving so many narratives wrong about modern gaming, and no matter which way you look at it, it's been a resounding success. So successful, in fact, that the hot news today is that Wukong is getting that expansion DLC in the future, very much in the same way that Elden Ring just got the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, which added over 20 hours of additional content. Wukong has already been a massive hit with the base game, with tons of replay value, but even just an extra 10 to 15 hours of story and boss battles would sell harder than the Denver Nuggets in Game 7. There's no release date on this DLC, but if Elden Ring is any indication, we can probably expect it in about 2 years. Not even a month out in the wild and this game is already getting an expansion. What is it about this game that makes it so great that it's been catapulted into superstardom basically overnight? Well, I waited to make this video until I got a little bit further in the game just so that I can speak from experience. As of recording this, I'm at the very beginning of Chapter 6. I'm in the home stretch of the game. I'm at level 80, just about to fight that first boss of the chapter. Let me know where you're at in the game below, or if you've already beaten it yourself. Beating this game is going to feel way more satisfying than beating others, just for the challenge factor alone. And that kind of speaks to why the game is so good. It's just plain fun, and the gameplay feels really rewarding. I will elaborate because gameplay is a big reason for the success of the game, but another major reason is the obvious. This game is doing China proud, and with a population of over 1.4 billion people, that's a lot of prospective players. It's the country's first major AAA success, so of course it's going to be a pretty big deal, and I'm sure a huge chunk of the Chinese gamer population hopped on this game right away. That's national pride in action. I guess it also helps that the game just plays well. It's a very polished action game with some Souls-like elements that I'd say is a little bit easier to get into than something like Bloodborne. Narratively, the game is really straightforward, especially early on. The first chapter is very linear and does a good job of getting players familiar with the basics. Gameplay mainly comes down to exploring the world and getting into boss battles, and that boss rush aspect was something that caught the game some criticism from games journalists when it first released. It might have been fair to say early on, but after the first chapter, the game starts to open up a lot and it really becomes a huge world, with plenty of spaces to explore and secrets to find. It's linear in so much that there's only one way to go to finish the chapter, but there's enough twists and turns and hidden passages that it makes taking the time to explore worth it. And it will also slow down the boss rush feeling a little bit. To be honest, it was never an issue for me. The bosses are all expertly designed, they're all unique with their own attack patterns, and they progressively get way harder as you play. I was breezing through the bosses in Chapter 1 and the early parts of Chapter 2, but when I got to the final boss in Chapter 2, that's when I realized what this game was really about. Finally getting that win on a tough boss that's been kicking your ass for the last hour is so satisfying, and it makes you want to keep playing to see if you can conquer the next one. Great gameplay and the backing of an entire nation is enough to launch any game to the moon, but there's one more thing that I think is helping the cause, and that's the response to Black Myth Wukong from all the worst people. Games journalists tried so hard to tear this game and its development studio apart, coming out with articles claiming that the studio, Game Science, was sexist with a history of misogynistic comments, Never heard that one before. Never mind that the sources are intentionally bad translations of what the developer said. Early critic reviews also said wild things like the game had a lack of diversity.
What?
These kinds of Stretch McArmstrong reaches would put Mr. Fantastic to shame, and it didn't take long for the internet detectives to get a whiff that something just wasn't quite right with what these articles were saying. People who actually speak Mandarin provided proper context and translations, which completely debunked any claims of misogyny that these radical journos were trying to make. And if I'm being honest, I think a good percentage of Western players specifically who got the game got it as a reaction to that kind of content. When the worst people in the industry tell you not to do something, you already know there's going to be a wave of people who do it. And it makes me wonder if this whole thing wasn't actually some kind of psyop. How can you write with a straight face that this game has a lack of diversity? Good joke. What diversity are we talking about here? Women? Because there's plenty of women in the game. Honestly, I felt like there were more women characters in Chapter 3 and 4 than there were men. Are we talking about the characters' sexuality? Because personally, I don't think it's that important one way or another. These characters could be gay, straight, anything in between, and we really wouldn't know because it's not important to the story or who these characters are. Well, except Pigsy. We know he loves the women. The Chinese mythological aspect is also really cool. Living in the US, I don't get exposed to this kind of thing too much. Whenever there's any kind of mythology over on this side of the pond, it usually relates to Judeo-Christian lore. Or if we're feeling exotic, we'll invoke Egyptian or Greek pantheons. But Chinese mythology isn't something that I see very often, and that's a huge bonus just for being unique in my eyes. Every second of this game oozes with aura. It takes you through a different part of the world, and it gave me the same kind of vibe that Jedi Survivor gave me on planets like Dathomir or Jeddah. It's just new, it's cool. Every chapter finishes with a cool animated cinematic and a traditional-looking mural that depicts the chapter you just played through. The game itself is based on the 16th century Chinese novel Journey to the West, and its events take place after that original story, which is such a nice concept. I can't speak on it firsthand, but I'm hearing that this game is doing a lot of good for China's tourism and just overall interest in the country. Chinese hotels that cater to gamers were booked solid on the night that the game released, and allegedly the travel rates to visit China have been a lot higher. It's mostly word of mouth, but considering I'm one of the people who got interested in this because of the game, I believe it. We can't talk about Black Myth Wukong without talking about our hero. The Monke is very cool. He's got style, swagger, it's just a neat character to play the game through. Stellar Blade spoiled me with the booty, while Wukong lets me play with my monkey. Imagine that. One thing that sets this game apart from something like Lies of P or even Stellar Blade is the lack of parrying, which was something that took me a little bit to get used to. The game does have a parry in the form of a spell, but it's a single use on a pretty long cooldown, so there's more dodging than anything in this game, which makes sense when you're playing as a nimble monkey king. The weapon of choice is a staff that lets you do combo attacks. The light attack is the bread and butter combo that you can mix in heavy attacks with, but the main idea behind combat is landing enough light attacks to build up your focus gauge and then unleashing a single powered-up heavy strike with full focus. It's a pretty unique combat style compared to other games, and I think this is another reason it's so fun. It's just new and different, and it functions exactly as intended. There were hardly any bugs or glitches in this game, at least I didn't encounter any that I remember. I can't think of a single time the game crashed, or that I got stuck, or fell through the map, or anything like that. It's just a fun, well-polished product, and can gamers really ask for much more than that? Black Myth Wukong is proving so many narratives wrong about the way modern AAA games are designed these days. Game Science is a relatively small studio with a reported 160 or so employees. That's all it took to make this game on a budget of $75 million USD. Compare that to something like Cyberpunk 2077, which cost about 5 times that much to make and had over 530 developers working on it at its peak. Compared to something like Concord, which spent 2 years longer in the oven and cost over 30 million more to make and is now completely dead on arrival. Video on that coming soon. This game is honestly doing so much necessary damage to the worst parts of the games industry. It's proof that you don't need to spend $500 million or have over 1,000 people working on it just to make a good game. If the talent and the passion is there and you just let the developers cook, the product will speak for itself. I have to also give praise for the complete lack of microtransactions or an in-game store. There's no loot crates or surprise mechanics, it's just the game, and player appreciation is through the roof for that. Games like Stellar Blade and Black Myth Wukong, they evoke a simpler time in gaming, when you just pop in the cartridge or the disc and you get exactly what you paid for. Designed to be played and replayed, and that's it. Wukong has the added benefit that it's a challenging game, and first-time players won't just breeze through it. Each boss gets progressively harder, and every victory feels like a genuine accomplishment. Beating this game is going to hit different than beating others, and that's a feeling you should want out of every game you play. All of these reasons wrapped up together is why this game is doing so well, and is the gaming success story of 2024. I hope you enjoyed my video. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like and dropped a comment below. Let's have a conversation about Black Myth Wukong. If you didn't like it, let me know what I can do better in the next one. But that's going to be all from me. This has been Star. Keep shining, baby. Peace.